Hello, my name is Daniel Marino and this is Motion Martial Arts. Today I would like to talk about a subject that I think is very important in practicing martial arts, which is specialization and specifically how it compares to well-roundedness. So right here, this circle represents the totality of human combat, martial arts in the broadest sense. And so that's not only kind of the unarmed martial arts that are typically practiced in modern day, but also martial arts using weapons, military combatives, military strategy, that kind of stuff, just everything. So just off the bat, most people watching this video imagine, practicing mostly unarmed martial arts, maybe with some, weapons, more classical traditions thrown in, or maybe for self-defense wise, practice stuff with firearms, other stuff. For the most part, let's just assume we're talking about unarmed martial arts. So there are two categories that's usually broken into, which is or three categories. You have grappling arts, you have striking arts, and then you have mixed martial arts. I think that these terms are useful, they can be convenient, but they're of course, they don't describe the way martial arts work, particularly well. Is that there's no pure striking and grappling arts. For the most part, most martial arts will incorporate some aspects of both with a particular concentration on one or the other. So for instance, I of course have done karate most of my life, it's where my background is in, there is grappling in karate. I've done it the whole time that I've been a student. But it's never something that we concentrate on. It's something that is a smaller part of our training, and the concentration is obviously with your striking techniques. I come from a Korean background, Korean Tang Sudo, Korean karate. So, we concentrate a lot on our kicking, probably more so than anything else, and then also our hand techniques. But maybe if you come from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, there's very, very little striking is normally practiced. It's kind of considered a supplemental skill. And then on top of that, you have your grappling skills with a particular focus on groundwork. So every martial art develops this way. And I'm not really here to argue, what might be the better way, but just to more specifically talk about the concept of specialization and how I think that it can be used well and how I think it can be misused. So the way that I see it is the specialization works is we start with the whole of martial arts, what this circle represents. And then there are things that we decide not to practice. So, we take off this piece. Let's say that, I don't do anything with weapons at all, from everything from firearms to traditional Okinawan Kobudo type stuff. I don't do anything with weapons, so take that out of the equation. And let's say that, coming from a karate background, do some grappling, and I've done a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I want to do more of it, that very, very little or no groundwork. So, kind of limited in the grappling side of things. And then let's say that, similarly, we have elbow strikes, we have knee strikes, we have all these strikes that are found in our traditional forms, and they are practiced, but not practiced, in the way that I come from a background where we did a lot of typical kind of karate point sparring style type stuff where, elbow strikes and our style competitions are illegal, knee strikes illegal, so we don't really practice that stuff, although they are part of our martial art to some extent, but we say take that out of the equation. So there's all these things they don't practice. And the circle just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And using more extreme examples, if you Western boxing, it's almost entirely you're striking with the four fists. So you're really only punching, with, of course, defensive skills and some clinch work that they do. But that's a substantial piece of the whole that just isn't practiced at all. Another extreme example is Olympic Taekwondo, where almost no hand techniques. They're doing just kicking. And so the idea is it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. We keep taking pieces off until what we're left with is, this is our martial art, this part in the middle, right here. So we practice just this piece, this tiny piece of the whole. And I want to talk about, there's some advantages to that, and I think there's a lot of disadvantages to it as well. So first of all, specialization is something, I think most people practice martial arts for enjoyment as much as they might practice it for self-defense or for any other reason. And it's fun to specialize, to take a particular skill and to develop it to a very, very high level, to the point you make it your own. It's something special that you do. And something I think that's one of the reasons, probably more so than anything else, that is why martial arts have a tendency to become so specialized. But at the same time, if we're talking about I think it's really one of the instructive things about modern martial arts the way they're practiced today, where after the UFC and after mixed martial arts demonstrated that when you are practicing a striking martial art with little to no grappling experience, that it can be pretty easy for an experienced grappler to handle you. So it kind of became apparent, okay, we need to be more well-rounded in our training. We need to have, even if you are a striker, you can use some examples. So Conor McGregor is a good example, very successful MMA fighter who, he does a little bit of everything. I would say for sure. He has Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience. He has some skills that he can use if the fight is on the ground, stuff like that. He also he does kicks, he does all this stuff. But what he's good at and what his main weapon is his boxing. He ends all of his fights with his hands, with those knockouts. So he's a good example of somebody who is well-rounded. He has a base of skills, and then he has one particular skill that he's developed to a much, much higher level than anything else, to the point that he's one of the best at it. So I think that is a good model to follow for the way martial arts should be practiced, is that we want to have a base of skills, so that there's nothing that we just don't do. For instance, a very common one that you have a lot of guys, especially coming from karate background, but striking in general, and it's like you have no experience whatsoever as to what to do if you find yourself on the ground, wrestling with someone or somebody trying to hold you down and to strike from that position. I think that's a problem. I think that we may not want to concentrate on ground fighting to the extent that a martial art like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu will, but we should have a set of at least basic skills so that we are somewhat familiar with fighting in that situation, in that environment. And this should be true of everything. It's that kind of longer range, unarmed combat comes with your kicks, and you get closer, then it's the hands, and you get even closer, it's elbows, knee strikes, headbutts. Then it's your skills working from the clinch, striking when you're in a clinch, executing takedowns from the clinch. Then if the fight goes to the ground, knowing how to defend yourself if you find yourself on the ground, or how to end a fight quickly once you're on the ground and safely remove yourself from the situation. I think these are all skills that we should practice. And then once you have your bases covered, you find a particular skill you want to elevate to a higher level. And I think that's the best way to train. Thank you very much for watching.